And now we're excited to talk about something that we've not really discussed before. Idon, I think you talked about it a little bit in the podcast you were on earlier this week, and that is residences. Residences is something that is coming to Upland, and it's something that I think ties everything we've talked about today together, from gamification, life. It ties together life. It ties together neighborhoods, neighborhood votings, mayor, the whole shot ties it all together here. So let's do an overview. What is residence? What is it in concept? How will it work? And go from there.
Yeah, so I think, again, another thing that we've always had on our minds and our roadmap, and I think we're finally in a place where we can start tying the knots together and putting it forth. And this is basically sparking the concept of, I don't want to say human, maybe it's llama life into the metaverse, right? So I think if previously, whenever I know that the community, there was the concept always requirement, when can I rent out my properties, right? And it was always, I think, perceived that you're renting it out to other players, which I don't think was always our basically long-term target. But we envision Upland partly, again, Upland, everything is based on properties. It's a property trading game, but then there's a whole metaverse that's built on top of it. And now we are starting to look at the the angle of Upland that makes it the world's most powerful communal city building game. And residence is going to be a big part of it. And what are residents? Basically, imagine that Upland as a platform is going to have a finite amount of residents, and these residents are going to be determined in correlation to the amount of residential units that are built in Upland. But an important thing is, they're not going to be one-to-one to residential units. They're going to be a small subsection of the residential units. And now that means that everybody that has a residential unit is going to start to competing for residents. And once you have residents on the micro level, obviously there is neighborhood residents, there is city residents, there's a general population of Upland, and that population fluctuates in accordance with things that happen in the Upland economy. And now the real beauty of it is that it takes a community to really attract large amounts of residents. And this comes with introductions of new types of utility structures into Upland.
Yeah, and there's categories to these utility structures. So you could see that we have 5 categories that we're starting with here. So health and public safety, essentials, entertainment, employment, transportation, and logistics. Maybe give us an example, Don, or can you give an example of what each of these, what type of structure is under each of these categories, and then why do players want to build these structures in their neighborhoods and in their cities?
Sure. So just by the way, just a small corrections. Not all of this is about structures, but we can go one by one about it. But the idea at the end of the day is that you as a neighborhood want to attract as many residents that you can, and once you do that those residents get distributed within the neighborhoods according to the residential units. Now, if you imagine a baseline, right? If you have nothing but residential units, there's going to be a cap of how much residents you'll be able to attract. So if you just keep building more apartments, more luxury houses, whatever, it's not going to add, at some point, it's not going to be, it will not lead to an increase of residency in your neighborhood, because those imaginary residents will start demanding services. And these services are basically split into these categories. So health and public safety would be things like police stations, hospitals, fire stations, etc. Essentials will be things like grocery stores, right? Like, kind of like hardware stores, etc. Entertainment is going to be things like, theaters and coffee shops and restaurants, and also speedways, by the way, would go under that category. And then when you get to the last categories, right, employment will be more about factories and meta ventures that operate within these neighborhoods. And last but not least, transportation and logistics will be currently implemented by the amount of cars and things like maybe in the future buses, vans, etc., that are being parked in those neighborhoods. So all of this together will tie into an algorithm that will not be visible to the community. So, from month to month, it may change, but that algorithm will compile basically what we currently call the neighborhood's draw, right? Like, what is the neighborhood's ability to draw in residents? And then maybe to complete the picture, seasonality will have in the future also effect for different types of cities. So you can imagine Park City in Utah, for example, would be very attractive in the winter when it's ski season, whereas Lake Tahoe, for example, would be very attractive in the summer. South Lake Tahoe will be more attractive in the summer, and some cities will be neutral for that. So all of this together basically is represented by an algorithm that on a daily basis will basically redistribute all of Upland's residents across all of Upland.
Yeah, and as a player, will I be able to see the total amount of residents that I have in all of my properties, or is it just on a neighborhood basis?
No, absolutely. This translates at the end of the day to local residents and the residents on a personal level. But your ability to kind of like affect the draw for your properties is very limited on a personal level, right? The most effective you can be with drawing residents is collaborating with your local governance, with your local neighborhoods, with your community.
Very cool. Metaverse Millen said, in the future, I see the yield being tied to resident mechanics. Is that something that's being considered?
Absolutely.
Is that likely?
Great idea.
Yeah, it's likely, it's there, it's going to be slow, right? Like everything, when we start touching economic parameters, yes, it may start with kind of like a very subtle structuring of how base yield is built up, for example, right? So that could be basically started as some kind of a boost to the base yield at the beginning, and we'll take these shifts very slowly. But absolutely, at the end of the day, high drawing neighborhoods will be rewarded in different ways, yield being one of the potential ways that they can be rewarded.
And Mass Chef is reading my mind here. Holy crap, it's SimCity on steroids.
So yeah, SimCity, but I think very, very important. Like SimCity, I mean, all of the successful, or at least the ones that I know, SimCity type of games are personal games. This is a communal SimCity on a global scale, which is something I think the world has never seen in a successful way before. Upland can be the first of that. And again, like I don't want this to, like, I don't know if I'm already envisioning some people saying, "Wow, why is Upland changing?" No. This builds on the entire concept, on the entire infrastructure. Everything at the end of the day ties to properties and virtual localities and everything we've envisioned for Upland. So now basically this is the time to make the next step there.
Yep. Rodrigo dropped in chat. When is this all starting?
So again, these are things we're actively working on. Both residents and life, we envision them to be deployed within 2025. Again, can't say that as a commitment, but these are things we're actively working on.
Very cool. Very, very exciting as well. Dirk, for you, from a community and culture perspective, you talked about stories before. You talked about telling your story. How do you think residents apply to that? How does it make Upland feel more like a real digital city? Like when you go to LA or you go to a neighborhood, what are your thoughts there?
Look, first of all, now Upland always felt kind of like a marketplace. You were trading properties and so on, right? But now it really feels like, like a populated world, right? At the end of the day, right? And then what does it mean, populated world? First of all, you will have, of course, community interaction directly there, but maybe also then in Discord, people are talking about their neighborhoods, about how to develop it further and so on. And this gives you also more cultural depth, right? What you have, because when you think about how it looks like in real life, right? When you go to a city and you go to Paris, you go to New York, every city somehow has its own characteristics, and that's exactly what we think is also going to happen here, because it's going to be the people who are going to shape those different neighborhoods, right? And because you have now this everyday realism, I tend to say, right, where people go and perceive that they are somehow in a real world, but at the same time it's a virtual world, right? And that's going to be really interesting to see what people are coming up with, new ideas around, creating new economic and social hubs, which will people will enjoy on an everyday basis. And it's going to be what is most importantly very diverse, right? It's not going to be just one fits it all. It's going to be very, very different, and it's going to be so interesting then to travel around in Upland, because it's not going to be the same buildings and everything. It's going to be vibrant neighborhoods, where different personalities, different kind of designs, they will inspire people to create something else, somewhere else new, or because they were inspired by others. And that's what Upland is about creation, value creation, and eventually also by making money out of that, because you're part of the value creation, and other people they appreciate what you have created.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that stuck out to me was the idea, or that I really like, is the idea that different cities, there's now a reason to own different cities. So for instance, Park City in the winter is going to be this destination point. Miami Beach in the summer, or Bermuda in the summer, may be this destination point. And it really adds to a unique feel, and a unique lifestyle in each of those cities. Not to mention, I mean, every city in Upland now will be truly unique. So that's something that has stood out to me in talking about this here.
Yeah.
So we do have some structures to show off of what these will look like. So what is this is clearly a barber shop. Give an overview, Adon, here of what this means for why would, as a player, why would I want to build this in my neighborhood?
Because you want to build the essential score. So one very important thing is that we talked about public and health and public safety. We talked about essentials. We talked about entertainment. Now, the very big factor in the algorithm will be variety, right? So if I just have a neighborhood full of supermarkets, but supermarkets only, but then there is a competing neighborhood which has a wide variety of essentials. So it has barbershops and supermarkets and hardware shops and whatever is the essentials are. The more the variety, the better. So the neighborhood that has a better variety, and if equal amounts are, if it's apples to apples, so it's the same, let's say exactly the same amount of structures, but one neighborhood only has barbershops and the other neighborhood has a much deeper variety, the other neighborhood would have an edge for the draw of residents. So that's why, like, these different types of structures both will add to the visual aesthetics and the characteristics of the cities, but also will be important for you to be able to draw in residents.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, these models, the colors aren't applied to these models. So you'll be able to make these unique for your neighborhood as well. The colors that are on there are the permanent colors to identify it, but the gray shell, you will be able to customize and make your own when you deploy those, just like with all the other structures. One of the questions came up, said there's a lot of communities or neighborhoods with small properties. These structures, for instance, the supermarket structure, will come in different sizes as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Like all of our structure types, right? There's a wide variety and everybody can find their own mix.
Yeah, it's super cool. One thing that I really like on the larger supermarket here, you can see that dumpster on the side. I think it's super cool. And then the shopping carts as well. And I'm really excited to see these types of structures start coming in at different sizes. And again, really making each of the neighborhoods unique, and then attracting residents as well. So we've got a small one. You could call this second supermarket, maybe more of a medium.
Maybe a grocery store, or,
a grocery store. Yeah, the first one's a bodega. The second one's maybe a grocery store, and then we've got our Costco model. I'm calling this our Costco / Sam's Club,
which is this is a great segue also, like, to the ability for Upland as a platform to attract commercial brands as well to the metaverse. So this can be something that we see in the future.
Very cool. Very, very exciting. Closing thoughts before we move on here, Adon, anything you want to wrap up with residents in Upland?
I see it like, to me, the trifecta of what we already have together with residents, together with life, is the moment that Upland bursts, like, from an inanimate metaverse into a living metaverse. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's constantly changing as well. You're going to see residents moving and changing neighborhoods, especially if certain neighborhoods, maybe they start out strong and then another neighborhood is more enticing. And
by the way,
there.
in the future, and hopefully not too distant future, right, you can also visualize the amount of residents by animations that are take place within their neighborhoods. So that would be all really something cool to look forward to.
Yeah, here's a future tripping question before we move on, actually, from Origins. Will stem growing plants allow harvest items to be sold at grocery stores?
Oh yeah, this is so we always had the vision of you being able to go buy pet food for your cat in a supermarket. Now, where did that cat food come from? Right, like whoever holds STEM would be able to repurpose and package it as NFT. So yes, this is a vision we've always had. I can't really say when it's gonna materialize, but absolutely, like we said, everything that makes cognitive sense will most likely be on the roadmap somewhere.
Yeah, very, very cool. Dirk, closing thoughts on residents before we move on here.
Now I want to see also maybe some how many did we have now? Six or eight, right? Examples of the first buildings. Where I want to also see maybe the community can also make suggestions, right? But what else could be there, right? So it's not just us doing the proposals, and also saw a thing. Someone proposed, that also the community should actually design some of those new shops and whatever we're going to have there.
Yeah, that's a great point for basically the motivator of UGC, because again, once we put in the variety requirement, again, the way for you as a neighborhood to obtain an edge is to get as much as variety as you can. So in the future, we do envision creators to be able to contribute to specific types of buildings, and thus increase their edge with being able to add variety to their communities.